Hello. I want to pay tribute to a friend of mine who died recently. He was an immigrant to this country and he set up business here, having come from Cyprus. He set up shop, worked hard. He was out buying stock at 6 a.m. and he retired only a few months ago, almost worked to the very end. I don't know how old he was exactly, but he was well over 80. He was a big, strong man with a huge presence and very little education. If he'd have had to have taken a test on book learning to get into this country, they wouldn't have let him in. But he worked hard. He made a good life for himself and for his children who've taken over the business. As I said, he was an immigrant and from what used to be the British Empire. Last week I made a video which showed a talk show, Good Morning Britain episode, in which two poisonous snakes, which we are nourishing in our national bosom, were telling everybody how terrible the British Empire was, how dreadfully rapacious the British people were. One of them called whiteness a psychosis. I'll leave a link for the people who didn't see it. And the two hosts, Piers Morgan and Suzanne Reid, listened respectfully to these two dreadful people who were talking about how awful life was for anybody who wasn't British under British rule. Unlike those two poisonous snakes, Vassos was glad of the opportunity. He didn't complain about the weather, and having come from Cyprus, I should think the weather was probably a bit of a shock, especially at 6 a.m. But he got on with things and he did well. Sargon mentioned in a recent video Napoleon's contemptuous description of the British as a nation of shopkeepers. I think Napoleon thought that we wouldn't put up much of a fight because Britain was full of small businessmen. It could be full of small businessmen because the British government never did try, relatively speaking, to interfere in individual responsibilities, unlike in France, which has always been set up economically to favour the big fish. Now, it's sort of interesting because in British common law, you can do what you want so long as it is not specifically forbidden. But in French law, and most continental law, it's exactly the other way round. You cannot do it unless it is specifically permitted. And that, of course, is exactly the attitude of the people who were setting up the EU. It was infected with this governmental heavy hand from the beginning. And it's most likely one of the reasons why the EU made us Brits, or most of us Brits, so uncomfortable. It's also the reason why Vassos came here and didn't go to Greece when he wanted to better his opportunities. He could see that this was a place that would give him more freedom to do that. Vassos was a good man, a solid worker, and a responsible citizen. Nobody invited him to speak on breakfast TV. He just got on with his life and he was happy enough to take from the British system what was due to him in the way of freedoms and assistance, whatever it was, and to give to the British system what he was obliged to do in the way of taxes. But he also gave many other things just by working hard and doing what he was doing without public fanfare, without over-sympathetic talk show hosts. He enriched us all just by being there, by his example and his honesty, unlike others who complain, whine, whinge and insult. Vassos came here to make a living, and he did that by just plodding on and doing good and shouldering his responsibilities and not complaining. And I shall miss him very dearly.